are somehow concerned about a new war in the West Asia between the
Yeah.
United States and Iran, which we know that would include Israel as well, which would be devastating for all the parties involved, in my opinion. And when we look at the current situation with the United States is bringing a lot of weapons to the region. Iranians is not like the 12-day war. They're prepared. They know the attack is coming. Israelis are prepared. Americans are prepared. Iranians are prepared. How do you see the current situation, and how do you see a confrontation between the two parties?
Well, at a political level, I must admit I'm a little baffled by the whole thing. I mean, the it's clear that the leader of Israel, Netanyahu, is hell bent on attacking Iran and taking Iran's military capacity away from it. I should point out that Iran has not instigated any attacks against Israel except in retaliation to attacks made by Israel against Iran. And the rhetoric in the West is not very informed, unfortunately. But basically, the situation is being driven mostly by Israel and also by the United States. It seems. It seems. I can't be sure since I'm not what I would call a deeply knowledgeable political observer. It seems that things did not go well between Netanyahu and Trump in the very recent meeting that just ended. It's it's clear that Netanyahu wanted the Americans to go against Iran again. It may well happen, given all the weapon systems that are being moved into place. But it does appear that Trump at least did not indicate to Netanyahu he was just going to go ahead, which again doesn't necessarily mean he won't, because this man is so erratic. But the problem really is that the Israelis have really made what I consider just an extraordinary strategic blunder. And I'll talk a little bit about this so your audience understands what I mean by it. But this strategic blunder is basically putting the Iranians in a position where they are justified in attacking Israeli cities. Prior to these most recent situation, the Iranians were very careful to focus their attacks on Israeli military installations. But the most recent attack by the Israelis to try to basically, I don't know why they believed they could do it, but to basically take off the head of the Iranian government to cause it to collapse. That attack involved a large number of attacks on urban installations. So, what that did was make it justifiable, and it is justifiable given the sad, but justifiable in terms of retaliation, for the Iranians to focus on Israeli cities. Now, the Israelis have several big cities, but only a few. It's a small country. And as I'll show with some of my briefing slides, that as Iran's capacity with ballistic missiles increases, and it's going to increase, and I'll explain what I mean by that shortly. As Iran's ability increases with its ballistic missiles, it is going to become more and more possible for Iran to cause catastrophic disruptions of Israeli urban areas. I mean, catastrophic. And it won't be at the level of what the Israelis have done to Gaza, but it will, in some ways, begin to approach that kind of damage and disruption. And of course, you don't need, societies are organized. And when you do damage to a society, you can't measure the full extent of the damage by saying, well, we destroyed 20% of the buildings. You know, if 20% of those buildings are embedded in a structure where they're connected to 75% of the other buildings in terms of supplies and relationships and services and things like that, you're crippling a society in a major way. And Iran is going to be, if it isn't there already, it is going to have the ability to do that to Israel. And that's not going to be tolerable for the Israelis. I mean, I don't know what they can do about it. I guess they could retaliate with nuclear weapons against Iran, but that would be suicidal because Iran has the capacity to build nuclear weapons and use them. And it's one thing for the Iranians to not go ahead and build nuclear weapons as they say they are doing, and as American intelligence seems to agree that that's not what they're doing. But they have the capacity. And the one way to assure that a country will use nuclear weapons on you if they have the capacity is to use nuclear weapons on them. So it is a dilemma. It's a deep dilemma. It's a deep dilemma for Iran, but it's just as deep a dilemma for Israel. And Iran is, of course, is a bigger country. Nuclear weapons are enormously destructive, but you have to use a significant number of them if you're going to destroy urban areas and military assets. And the number of military assets and cities in Iran is tremendously larger than what exists in Israel. So this is not a good mathematical relationship from the point of view of the Israelis. And they have, in effect, opened the door to a potentially very dangerous confrontation and ladder of escalation of some kind or other. But the biggest immediate problem is the non-nuclear threat that Iran now has and will predictably grow. I mean, it's not just that they have it now. As the Iranian, as the size of Iran's ballistic missile forces grows, by size I mean numbers, as the numbers grow and the accuracy, and I'll show you what accuracy means, it'll have meaning shortly, and the accuracy improves. And incidentally, the Russians are now talking about helping the Iranians improve their accuracy technology in their ballistic missiles. That seems to be an arrangement that the Russians are working on with the Iranians. And that's going to have a big significance, as I'll show you shortly. Of course, China could choose to do that as well because they have the advanced missile guidance and control technology. And Iran is only a small step away from improving its accuracy significantly. I mean, it already has tremendous technical capabilities, but could get a good boosting help from either Russia or China. And the increase in accuracy doesn't have to be enormous. As I'll describe, I'll show that the evidence is maybe the accuracy of Iran's most ballistic missiles as measured from, let's say, the 12-day war. It's probably around 1,000 meters, a kilometer. When you have a kilometer accuracy, to get to 500 meters is not a gigantic step. To get to 100 meters, that's a lot. But to get 500 meters is not a lot in terms of the improvements in technology. And Iran is poised to be able to do that, especially with the help of the Russians. And so as we watch in time, as this confrontation goes on in time, Iran is going to have more missiles because it's clear that they understand that these missiles are a unique tool for them to threaten and stand off Israel. And as the guidance and control, as the accuracy improves, the effectiveness of those missiles for disrupting, possibly even closing down the function of civil society in Israel is going to increase dramatically. So the clock is not on Israel's side. And I think it's this strategic blunder, among many strategic blunders, that now has Israel in a very bad situation that can only get worse in time, and significantly worse. So why don't we just start with, let's just take a look at slide 2. I have a couple of simple slides. So the point I made earlier is the attack on Tehran was a gigantic strategic blunder, and in slide 3, the reason for it is it crossed, if you go to the next slide, it crossed the line from attacks on purely military targets to attacks on cities. So if we go to slide 4, all we're saying is Israel only has a small number of cities. The combination of large numbers and ballistic missiles, larger numbers of ballistic missiles and improved accuracy will give Iran over time an extraordinary and growing strategic lever against Israel. So the two factors that will increase this capability to leverage against Israeli society, the first one is obvious: the numbers of missiles will grow. The second is less obvious. The second is the improved accuracy of those missiles. So basically, what slide 6 shows, this is really not a, it's just a conceptual slide. Small problems in shutting down the rocket motor when, before the rocket reaches a certain, when you're trying to place the rocket at a certain speed. Small differences in the angle at which the rocket is flying when the motor shuts down. Those small differences have to be reduced if you want to increase the accuracy of the missile. At the far end of the trajectory, there are also miss errors that are introduced by the atmosphere. The missile may wobble a bit, but those kinds of errors can be reduced tremendously, and the evidence is the Iranians already know how to do that. So what they really need to do to significantly improve their accuracy, I'm saying go to 500 meters from 1,000, is they have to do better at shutting down the rocket motor at the right time and making sure that the orientation of the missile at shutdown is accurate enough, is good enough. And they'll get that help. They'll be getting that help from the Russians, if not the Chinese later. So if we look at the situation, what we know, if we go to slide 7, is we have an estimate of the accuracy of these ballistic missiles from the attack on the Nevatim air base during the October war in 2024. They obviously wanted to do damage to the base. This distribution of warheads is basically shows you what the accuracy of their capabilities are. I mean, one of the warheads actually hit a building and probably destroyed an F-35 in it. There's a lot of discussion about that. These are probabilistic events. The distribution that you're seeing here is really the way you get an estimate of the accuracy of Iran's ballistic missiles at that time. That doesn't mean it can't improve. In fact, it will improve, and that has meaning in a different situation from the ones that people tend to focus on. The possibility that the accuracy of Iran's ballistic missiles will get so high that they can selectively target aircraft and shelters and things like that is very low, at least in the near future. It's just the technologies involved are extremely advanced and will be very difficult to implement, even for an advanced, and Iran is an advanced country. It's just that these technologies are very, very difficult to master. for ballistic missiles, it will be hard to do. Actually, Iran's cruise missiles, I'm not talking about their drones, their cruise missiles, have demonstrated tremendous accuracy. And the reason there is we saw in the attack on the Saudi Arabian oil fields evidence that the Iranian cruise missiles have the ability to lock on to an object of a certain shape and home toward the center of that object. And I could show that in another discussion. I can show you the evidence for that. So the cruise missiles are extremely accurate, but the ballistic missiles are a long way from that. So if we want to understand what kind of damage the ballistic missiles could do to an urban area, we need to understand what damage an explosion might do. So let's look at slide 8. I won't go through this in detail, but slide 8 basically shows the ranges at which certain amounts of blast overpressure from a general purpose bomb will occur. It's a general, it's a very general qualitative curves. So for a 1,000 kilogram warhead, probably 100 meters will give you around 2 pounds per square inch at 100 meters. It could be 120 meters, it could be 130, but let's just, at 50 meters, you're going to get maybe 5 pounds per square inch. And maybe at 15 meters or so, you might get over 40 pounds per square inch, which is enough to knock down a concrete and steel wall. So let's just take a look in the next slide just to get a sense of what damage could look like. Go to slide 9. This is just an image from Gaza. And I'm just trying to give you a sense of what kind of damage is done by bombs. We're looking through a hole in a wall in a building. That hole was probably produced by the blast wave from a roughly 500 or 1,000 kilogram bomb that landed at 50 to 100 meters away. In other words, the blast, of course, it depends on the strength of the wall, but it's the kind of damage you can expect at 50 or 100 meters. If you look at the far end, you can see what a direct hit looks like on a building that's of significant structure, concrete and steel, reinforced structure. The structure a little forward of it is damaged not from a direct hit, but from secondary shock waves. So that maybe there was a bomb or bombs that landed 30 or 40 meters from it. The point I'm making here is that there's a lot of damage beyond the point where a bomb actually hits. So that's the point I'm trying to make here. And so we see on the left side a building where the exterior walls have been largely knocked out while the building roof and floor still seems intact. And that was probably done by a blast 40 or 50 meters away, and the walls just collapsed, were blown in. That's a lot of damage, just from bombs that actually didn't hit the target. If we go to the next slide, we see the interior apartment of a house in Israel, an apartment in Israel. And this apartment was probably 100, 150 meters away from a 500 to 1,000 kilogram ballistic missile explosion. So it was a good distance, 50 or 100 meters. So there's a lot of general damage. You can see that the window to the exterior is blown out, and there's general disruption inside. If the blast were maybe half the distance, the exterior wall could actually be blown out. So if we look at slide 11, this is an example of damage done by a bomb that probably landed maybe, 50 or 60 meters away from the walls in this building. They were just shattered. And of course, the interiors were badly damaged. You can see evidence that there were fires in the building because fires get initiated when these things happen. There's nobody around to fight the fire because people are either injured or they evacuate, and tremendous damage tends to be done. Okay, so we have a sense of what the damage does. So let's go to slide 12. Okay, this is a simulated missile impact diagram. And if you look on the upper left corner, I have a little key to what the different circles show. The outer yellow circle shows you about 2 pounds per square inch. That's the apartment that has general damage inside it without the walls being knocked down. The 5 psi contour shows you where, if a bomb landed close enough, it would have knocked the exterior walls, would have damaged severely, might not have knocked them in, would have severely damaged the exterior walls of the apartment in the building, at least at the surface. And the 40 psi curve, which is in red, shows you where basically it would knock the structure down. Do enough severe damage to the structure itself. Okay, so let's take a look. This is a simulation of 100 missiles with 1,000 meter accuracy. And I'm assuming a 1-ton warhead, but 500, half a ton is fine. It's all notional. And you can see that if you were firing at Tel Aviv, and we know the Iranians were, a significant number of warheads would have landed in the downtown area, which we know occurred. And we also know that there was a lot of damage in downtown Tel Aviv, although the Israelis tried to mask it all. But if you went and talked to somebody who was in downtown Tel Aviv, they'd tell you there was bomb damage all over the place. Very, very damaging, real problem. The Israelis tried to tried to downplay it, but there was certainly a lot of reaction from the Israeli population. And in fact, I conjecture, I don't know, that a lot of this discussion about running out of missile interceptors and the interceptors not working perfectly as they were working is just a smokescreen. The defense interceptors were not working very well to begin with. And these missiles basically came in unopposed to a first approximation. There may have been some intercepts, but it was very low number, maybe 5%. I would be very surprised if it's as much as 1 in 10. I'd be very surprised if it's that high. So there's a mythology that the Israelis have been trying to promulgate, which they can't hide from their population, because the Iranians showed their population what could happen. And, so there's a big set of lies that are being promulgated to the Israeli people and to other organizations, that the defenses are just running out of interceptors, and there are some minor problems with their intercept rates and things of that type. When in fact, they've never been effective at all. And pretty much most of what the Iranians fired. But you see, if you only have 1,000 meters precision, you're going to have a lot of warheads just falling into the Mediterranean, for example. That's what happens when you have a weapon that's not as accurate. Now, what happens when they actually go to when the same number of 100 missiles have an accuracy of 500 meters rather than 1,000 meters? This shows in the next slide here. Well, things look a lot worse. And you can see that the downtown Tel Aviv area gets at least twice the density of impacts, which is not a good sign if you're Israeli. Now, of course, this is a simulation for 100 missiles. Well, Iran doesn't have to restrict it. As time goes on, Iran will not only improve its accuracy, but it will also improve it will advance in the number of missiles that it can launch. So let's take a look in the next few slides about what a 500 missile attack could look like with a 500 meter accuracy. Let's go to slide 15. Okay, so this shows you what 500, the inner circle, you see these two roughly orange circles. One is the accuracy, one is 1,000 meter distance. It's not the accuracy, it's 1,000 meter distance. And the other outer one is 2,000 meters distance. So you see a very large percentage of the warheads land in the urban built-up area of Tel Aviv. We can go a little closer in the next slide. Let's go to slide 15. We just, all right, 16. Let's go. 16 is just a close-up. The reason I put a close-up here is you can see the buildings. Let's just look at the density of impacts here. Try to understand what it means. If we look at the red circles, those are circles within which the blast intensity of the incoming warhead will be enough to either knock down the building or knock down large parts of the building. So that's going to be severe. The blue lines show you where a large amount of general damage will occur, including to apartments that are adjacent. Interior walls of apartments knocked out, fires initiated in a lot of buildings, people injured from flying debris, getting out of the buildings, fires in general around. And then the yellow line shows a lot of general damage, broken windows and more, in the streets, in buildings. And so this whole area is covered with general damage and severe damage in this small area. And of course, this is just a small area. I just selected arbitrarily. So if I go to slide 17, I can just show you what the whole city looks like. In this case, I show you the accuracy of the missile is 500 meters. And you can see that the density is so great that it even blocks out the cities. I mean, and each of the red dots, remember, do severe damage to buildings, concrete and steel buildings, big buildings, strongly built buildings, and then very large amounts of general damage to structures around them, interiors of buildings around it. This shuts, Tel Aviv is no longer a functioning city after an attack like this. Haifa is no longer a functioning city. Beersheba is no longer a functioning city. These cities can be shut down completely by a few thousand ballistic missiles with a 500-meter accuracy, which you can be sure that in the next, let's say, 5 years, Iran will have, because Israel cannot stop them from building ballistic missiles. They will have I think the outrage from Russia and China will not, there'll be plenty of materials made available to Iran to continue manufacturing these ballistic missiles. And the technology for improving their accuracy is well in hand, and all the Iranians need, because they're already a sophisticated country with advanced engineering capabilities, is a little help from either Russia or China or both to refine these missiles to a 500-meter accuracy. So we're talking about a very big strategic problem that the Israelis have brought on themselves by this aggressive behavior. So let me just go to slide 21 because I made a point about lying to the Israeli people. This is a slide. This is from 1991. It's I think it's this actually may have occurred in Saudi Arabia, where Patriots were used to defend Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Spectacular photograph. Most people misunderstood it, and in fact, the Raytheon Corporation took a great. Let's just look at what it says. When a system does everything in combat it was designed to do and more, that's proof of performance. Okay, this is an Aviation Week and Space Technology, and it ran 2 pages. Total lie by Raytheon, the company that's still building Patriots and claiming they work when they don't. This time-lapse photo, let's just stop for a second and understand how the time-lapse photo works. The camera is focused on the skyline, and the camera aperture is open. It doesn't open and close like a regular photograph. It's just open. When a Patriot interceptor is launched, it has a rocket motor that's burning. And the rocket motor looks like a point of light. And that point of light traces a line on the film of the camera, because this is a time exposure. And you see the line in both cases disappears because the Patriot burns out. It finishes its powered flight. And then it flies like a bullet, and it maneuvers by changing its orientation in the atmosphere. Now, you see those two dots in the sky. Those two dots are the explosion of the Patriot warheads. They have nothing to do with intercepting a Scud. We, again, I can actually do this as a separate talk, because we found this engagement on a video camera where we had it frame by frame. And if in fact they had hit the Scud, this was one Scud came in, they missed it with both explosions. The Scud was probably bright enough, it should have appeared like a little bit of a track. In other words, the Scud was bright enough, you should have seen it as a track on this black photo. Somebody took that track and blacked it out. So this was consciously a fraudulent photo. Okay, so this is what the Israelis tell their own people. This is what the American contractors tell the Saudis and the Poles and the Ukrainians and the whoever else is foolish enough to spend money on their system for anti-missile. Against aircraft, it's a very effective system. I want to be clear. I mean, you don't want to fly against Patriots if you're in an airplane. But as a ballistic missile defense, it's worthless. And as we know from the Ukraine as well. So what we have here is an example of layers upon layers upon layers of fraud that have been foisted off on the populations of different countries, on the American taxpayer, because the American taxpayer has bought most of these patriots for all these other countries, including Israel and Ukraine. And what we have is nothing but a fraud against the American taxpayer, the Israeli public, the Ukrainian population. Ukraine, of course, is a horrific situation because we, the Americans, have put the Ukrainians in a situation where their country has been destroyed and will continue to be destroyed if it doesn't negotiate with what's left of it with the Russians. And you still can find articles in the New York Times, this paper that's supposed to be the paper of record. Just the other day, there was, I shouldn't laugh because it's so serious. There's an article about how Pokrovsk in Donbass had just fallen. Pokrovsk fell 2 or 3 months ago. The New York Times is now reporting it. I mean, this is a crime. You have these unbelievably courageous Ukrainian soldiers fighting for their country, for what they believe is the survival of their country. And they're dying at a tremendous rate, and for nothing. This can all be stopped by simply carrying on a realistic negotiation. But the administration, the political administration in Ukraine, which I personally, the best analogy I have is Hitler letting all these Germans die as the Russians closed in on Berlin, when the best thing to do would have been to surrender. The war was over. Why cause all these people to die? Of course, they were executing their own people in the streets for not fighting. It's this kind of fascism, and it is fascism, that is contributing to the complete destruction of Ukraine. And I mean the complete, because all of these dying soldiers are going to cause the demography of Ukraine has been altered for the next 20 years. And there's going to be an incredible dip in the birth rate. There already is. And Ukraine could potentially even disappear as a culture. I don't think it will, but so all these extremists who are these people who are Banderites, these people who are white supremacists who think that they're saving uh, Ukrainian ethnicity are destroying it. So we have all this complexity going on in the world in front of us. And the cynical uh, political leadership of NATO and the United States as well is resulting in the extraordinary, I mean, I just can't, I'm beside myself when I think about the loss of life in Ukraine for no reason. And just negotiate. Stop trying to make yourself an existential enemy of the Russians. Just live beside them and stop this unbelievable slaughter, because the Russians are going to stop it anyway. And they could stop it by just reaching an understanding, or they can stop it by basically completely destroying Ukraine as a viable state, which is what I think is going to occur, unfortunately. So anyway, sorry to jump around like I did, but it is really from the point of view of a technologist like myself, who also, of course, is most deeply concerned with the violence in the world and its negative consequences. I mean, I just look with despair, even though, this talk is in some sense very simple. I illustrated, the diagrams took a long time to put together. I just didn't think them up, but it took me a little while because I wanted to make them understandable. So you can look at it and just visualize it. Me telling you 500 meter CEP and so what? But when you see it laid out on a map, you begin to understand what the consequences are, because we are basically visual animals. Our entire ability to learn is based on visual capabilities, and then the abstractions come after that. So that's basically what I have to share on this particular issue, or these issues.